Salutations, respected viewers. So, the motion before the House is this House supports Brexit. Right, I shall kick off as the proposition, of course. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the House, we support Brexit for the following reasons. It is the will of the people. It's bringing back independence to the United Kingdom. It will stop the gross waste of money, that is the UK's EU membership. It will get rid of all this over-regulation and excessive bureaucracy, and it will slim down immigration to a sensible level. So let me go over these one by one. We all know the fantastic result of 2016. Perhaps some of you didn't agree with that, but the decision has been taken. That's it. There's no going back. We've only got to go forward. Alea jacta est. So there have been quite a few referenda held in the United Kingdom since 1973. Only 3 of them held for the whole of the United Kingdom. Most of them held for parts of the UK, Northern Ireland or Scotland or Wales or London or Birmingham, about elected mayors and things like that, directly elected mayors. But the result has always been implemented. When people have voted to do something, to change something, that has always been given effect. When people have voted to maintain the status quo, that has always happened. So it would obviously be completely wrong for the very first time to break with precedent and not to give effect to the will of the majority. So 52% of people voted for leaving the European Union. That's a clear majority. So it wasn't very high, but it doesn't matter. Even if you win by 1 vote, you win. That was it. We're going to have any no post factum rules completely slanting things towards the Remainers, saying, oh, they have to win by 65%, or something grossly unfair and inequitable. One thing is there's a very high turnout, so there can be no doubt about the validity and the legitimacy of this result. And if the United Kingdom has any claim to be a democracy, then this result must be put into effect. So the United Kingdom is claiming back her sovereignty. It was pooled with the other EU countries for years, and now the UK is claiming it back. You may have heard of the Treaty of Lisbon, and the Europhiles here will presumably be ardent supporters of the Treaty of Lisbon. Many Eurosceptics were against it. However, the Treaty of Lisbon specifically granted all EU member states the right to withdraw from the EU at any time. So it's absolutely crystal clear the United Kingdom has the right to reclaim her independence, and she's doing that. So the EU at the moment is grossly unrepresentative, Malta having something like 12 times the per capita representation of the United Kingdom. It makes a mockery of democracy. So these are rotten boroughs. The EU is completely gerrymandered. The EU is undemocratic. It has ignored referenda which haven't gone its way in France, in the Netherlands, in the Republic of Ireland twice. When the public vote against further EU integration, the EU forces them to vote again. That happens in Denmark, throwing loads of money into it, loads of lies, throwing everything in the kitchen sink for the cause of ever closer union. They've sacked governments by telephone. They demand that new prime ministers be brought in. They won't allow Greece to pursue the socialist policies that most people in Greece voted for. They've fomented conflict in the Ukraine. The undemocratic government there that was brought there by an illegal putsch. The fascist movement there that's dominating the government. The EU's foursquare behind that. The EU's launched its war of aggression in Libya, bombing Libya, causing hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants to come into Europe. The EU has ripped up its own Schengen agreement and allowed hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants to move all over the EU, causing social services to all but collapse. So the EU is cataclysmic. I'm very glad to be getting out of this cacocracy that is the EU. The EU is also execrable in its use of public money. Why would one give another OB to an institution which hasn't produced proper accounts for 20 years? The EU's own Court of Auditors has refused to sign off on the accounts for 20 years. So much money has disappeared to the bank of nowhere, lining the pockets of corrupt bureaucrats, and nothing is ever done about it. Nobody ever serves a day in jail or is even sacked. So the Common Agricultural Policy is calamitous. It keeps food prices artificially high, which hits the poorest. It subsidises struggling farmers such as the Prince of Wales. So these multi-millionaire farmers are paid not to grow anything in set-aside. The Common Fisheries Policy, which has made certain species of fish all but extinct in the United Kingdom's territorial waters. So many fish are caught, then thrown back in dead. How good for the environment is that? It's insane. And all these ludicrous policies are going from the EU, and the Europhile bigots simply refuse to do anything about it, no matter how disastrous EU policies are. Their blind faith in the EU brooks no persuasion. They won't be won over to more sensible policies. I've been hearing this mantra, reform of the EU, for 20 years. It never, ever happens. It only ever gets worse. Any crisis will be capitalised on by the EU to say more Europe, more integration, more regulation, more money must be wasted. So bureaucracy. It's good for the bureaucrats. And I know you'll say there are not that many EU bureaucrats, but that's because the bureaucrats of member states, such as the UK, are mainly working for the EU. Using public money to subsidise EU propaganda, even in schools, trying to brainwash our children, giving out these junkets to people at university who want to go on to become bureaucrats. So it's outrageous. Bent bananas is just one of the examples of countless pieces of EU legislation, of over-regulation, of trying to dictate to us the minutiae of our lives. The EU is a control-freak institution which is fixated with controlling even the tiniest facet of our existence and robbing us of all autonomy and agency. And all these EU directives are dictating what the member states must do. And I know there's gold plating. Sometimes UK civil servants take it a step further. All right. But at base, the problem is the EU over-regulation, its hyperactivity. It wastes money moving its parliament from Brussels to Strasbourg and back again. So much for the environment, which the EU claims to care about with all this unnecessary travel. How about kilometrage EU politicians ripping off the taxpayer, allowed to charge for travel expenses without showing any receipts, deliberately ripping off the public? So the EU has led to excessive immigration from all EU member states. People without any restriction can come. Now, not all against all immigration. Some immigrants are wonderful people. We need a selective, sensible immigration policy of fewer people. They're not bad. We want some. We don't want limitless numbers. And it's been more than 20 times greater than predicted. So it wasn't phased in. Immigration rules always happen. We want immigration to happen. We no longer want the racist discrimination of favouring EU citizens over non-EU citizens. And for those reasons, I beg to propose. Right, I am the opposition, and Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, this House opposes Brexit for the following reasons. An economic disaster is going to occur because we have no trade deal in sight, because we're going to have to accept some of this EU regulation anyway, and because it will cut down on our ability to secure ourselves. Let's go through these one again and again. And the EU is a wonderful idea, but it's obviously terrible at PR. If it really was such a nefarious plot, then it would be better at propagandizing for itself. I think the greatest benefit, which we often take for granted, is peace. Until the European Union come along, these European countries slaughtered each other in their millions for centuries. And finally, we've had peace. No EU member state has ever gone to war against another EU member state since it's been founded. So what has saved us in money and misery is incalculable. Leaving the EU is going to be an economic calamity. It wiped so much of the value of the UK stock market. Immediately after the Brexit vote, it wiped off more than the UK had ever put into the EU in almost 50 years. It's already hurting the economy. The economy has slowed down so much, and the pound has lost a lot of value. There is no trade deal in sight, and what Theresa May is going to sign up to is being in the EU in all but name anyway, having to accept regulations without having the least influence over the content of said regulations. It's daft. Far better to stay within the European Union. And what is all this is this regulation that he is whining about? Workers' rights, so we're not exploited, so we're paid a living wage. The environment is protected. You want us to be poisoned? The EU has done us so much good. So really, we should be singing its praises from the rooftops. It has emancipated us. It has not oppressed us. We'll be getting rid of the European arrest warrant. So far, it has helped apprehend so many dangerous criminals. Previously, the extradition process was very lengthy and expensive, and sometimes people just didn't bother, and sometimes there was no extradition treaty with Spain as recently as the 80s. But we've managed to reduce crime very significantly because of this. Intelligence sharing has helped us so much as well. Now, he says cut down on immigration, which is clearly a dog whistle. This is xenophobia at play. The reason that his side won that referendum by the narrowest possible of margins was nativism, the appeal to the basest prejudices of ethnicity and religion. So that's why there's been a huge spike in racist incidents since the Brexit vote. It's poisoned our public discourse. So I want no truck with this kind of rebarbative rhetoric. And his side, they got a few more votes than the Remain side, partly because of flagrant lying. You remember that £350 million figure on the bus, since repudiated by the Eurosceptics, or what else? Daniel Hannan, this stalwart Eurosceptic, saying nobody's talking about leaving the single market, and now they're all talking about the single market. It's preposterous, so they can't get their story straight. Yet more flagrant lying from the Eurosceptic bigots. It really is bile that they've injected into the body politic. We are facing a severe paucity of key workers, doctors, nurses, vets, and so on. Applications to be a nurse in the UK from EU countries are down drastically since the Brexit vote. People feel the atmosphere has been poisoned by this xenophobic discourse. So this hostile environment discourse has also led to the Windrush scandal of people who've been resident in the United Kingdom for up to 60 years being kicked out, some of them even British citizens. So what are we going to do? The National Health Service is facing collapse because of this calamitous self-inflicted wound, the moronic Brexit decision. All right, we're all human. We need to share our planet, share our continent, cooperate, help each other. All right, it's not about hostility. It's about cooperation, mutual aid. It's severely endangering peace in Ireland. What we're going to do about the border in Northern Ireland, and there could be no trade. Dissident Republicans are already talking about capitalising on this to launch a new terrorist campaign. We had 20 years of extraordinary amity between the United Kingdom and the Republic of Ireland, and all that is being jeopardised by this monstrous and moronic Brexit decision. So it is not legally binding. Parliament is not obliged to implement this. This is why we demand a people's vote and the right to change our minds, which everybody has that entitlement, the right to put back this terrible decision. And you don't want another vote in Parliament? We were told it's all about parliamentary sovereignty. So yet more ridiculous lies. There are no trade deals in sight with any other country outside the EU. And if we do get a trade deal, they smell blood, the United States and elsewhere, and they would demand terms which are very disadvantageous to us. So leaving the EU would be cataclysmic, and we must reconsider this decision. There was also illegal propaganda, and there was illegal spending from the pro-Brexit side, which is why this result is a nullity. It must be rerun, with giving people the option to stay in the European Union, as well as possibly accept any Brexit deal if one is thrashed out, which looks highly improbable. So let me reiterate again the reasons why it is crucial that we reverse this moronic Brexit decision. Because we are facing economic meltdown, because the European Union has guaranteed peace for decades and shall do for centuries, because EU legislation is often very welcome and sensible indeed, because the Brexit result was based on racism and deceit. And for those reasons, I plead with the House to vote down this rebarbative motion.